want to take a look at the move-out report. It's important for me to do the move-out report before I do what's called return the deposit or credit the deposit to the lease. The reason for this is the way the move-out report will present. Let me show you what I mean. This is the move-out report. It's the move-out reconciliation or move-out rec report. This is important in many states, so you have to produce this at a certain date. So my suggestion, and it can vary depending on how soon you have to produce this, as soon as you know what those fees and charges and everything, rent, whatever is owed, as soon as you know what that is and your register looks good, your next step is going to make sure to use the date specified, which means rather than the move-out date. Because if you use the move-out date, all you're going to show is what happened the move-out date and prior. Well, they're out, and we've added some charges since then. So if we don't use the date specified, we might risk not showing them all of their debt. So in this particular scenario, we're going to use the date specified. Let's run it as of today. That's everything. I think that was our last entry was today, I'm hoping. And if not, I'll fix it. So I do want to hide reversals after move out. The importance of that is if PropertyBoss has done some prorations, added some rent, subtracted some rent, like in our previous example, we don't want all that to show up. The tenant won't get it. And so it just confuses the matter. So be sure that that's clicked. These two things, date specified, hide reversals after move out, very important. And then we'll say, okay. Now let's look at this move out rec report. This is what's important about that specific date and performing this particular step, printing the move out rec prior to the deposit being returned or even touching the deposit, is because we want to show what we're holding. Right now we're holding $900 as of this moment. In a minute, once we start messing with the deposit, sure enough, we're no longer holding $900. So it's important that that shows for integrity for the tenants. Now, balances due as of move out, they've already moved out, and look at this. They owed us this, they owed us this, they owed us this. But then look at this, activity since move out. Since they've moved out, they incurred a late fee and they incurred a damage fee. So all of this has to do with what they owe us. So they owe us a total of $5,800 here, it looks like, all in. So having said that, if that's what they owe us, some of that is going to be covered by this $900 security deposit. How do we get that security deposit to go where it should go? That's the next step. Once we've printed this out and we're good to go, the very next thing we'll do is step number 6, which is return the deposit. The critical part of this return the deposit is I always do it the day after the last charge. So technically I would do it as of 7/20. So it's going to ask you which one if you use this little move wizard. Which one? And the reason I say which one is because sometimes you'll have a last month's rent deposit that you're holding. Sometimes you'll have a key deposit or a pet deposit. So each deposit needs to be dealt with on its own, and you need to return each one to the tenant's register. So I have returned that selected deposit. Let me show you what that means. That means that when I go to this particular register, PropertyBoss has very helpfully credited the amount of the security deposit to this register. Now, what that means, think about deposits as being in buckets. When you first collect the deposit, you're going to stick it in a bucket. Technically, you're sticking it in a bank account. Hopefully, it's a separate bank account. In the event it's not, some states don't require that, you still have put it in and isolated it or put it in tagged it, earmarked it as a liability. So that security deposit is indeed a liability that you are responsible for holding until which time you are going to disperse it. Sometimes that means you're actually collecting it all back. Sometimes it means you're paying it to an owner or a vendor. It could mean sometimes you're returning some of it to the tenant. In this scenario, it's going to be all kept. So in order to get it as usable money from out of that zero state that it was sitting in, we've credited it back to the lease. That's what deposit return means. credit the security deposit back to this lease. They are the same thing. If you have a transaction in your PropertyBoss and you're a bit of an older, you've been around for a little bit longer with us, then this might say deposit return. It is the same thing. It functions the same way. Takes it out of zero, takes it out of your liability, and brings it back. Now, the next thing we would do in the event that we actually had money to pay back to our tenant, which we don't in this scenario, but let's imagine that we did. Let's imagine that we had money to pay back. Our next step would be to create a bill to pay, and that bill to pay would be the balance of the security deposit. So what we would do in that scenario is, again, enter a new transaction. And in my software, in my case, it's called a refund. Many of your softwares, it's called deposit refund. It doesn't matter. If it says refund, it's going to work for you. You can refund, and it'll automatically pop up all the monies that are still sitting there ready for refund. I know I've done the wrong thing here because zero popped up. But let's imagine for kicks and giggles that $500 was left and $500 was going to be their refund. I can go ahead and click OK. It'll save that in your bills to pay, and you are ready then to pay that bill or refund that out when the time is right. In our scenario, however, this deposit you'll see was sucked up by all of those open charges. There was some rent that was open, a late fee, damage fee, all that $900 got sucked up. And the only thing that's still owing, and we can see it because there's a big yes right here, is that damage fee. So that damage fee is not quite paid off, leaving this tenant with the net balance of $4,850 after that security deposit has been applied. Now, you don't have to do anything with that security deposit when you do the return, except I would utilize this particular time and moment in time to move the money out of your security deposit account, if you keep it separate, and into your operating account. And then from your operating account, you will be making these payments naturally. They're all going to be naturally, as the money is applied, as any money that's coming from the security deposit is applied, it looks just like a payment, and it will deliver the same way it delivers every other bit of money that you are collecting from this operating account. Now, my suggestion is, if you have two separate accounts, keep your activity on your security deposit account minimal. Security deposit in, security deposit out, in whole figures. If you try to pay dollars and cents out of your security deposit account, technically you're bringing just chaos around your head. It becomes more difficult. It's harder to track. PropertyBoss, quite frankly, doesn't work that way. It doesn't see it that way. It sees it, everything coming out of your operating account. So in the event that you don't have multiple accounts, you just have one account and security deposits are earmarked in there, and your rest of your money in and out, rents in and out, bills in and out, all of that is in one big account. You don't have to worry about that step. Don't think about it. It's not a step for you. However, you will need to move the money in the event that you have the two different accounts. And then PropertyBoss will do the accounting properly for you. And you can see, I'll just touch briefly on where that happens in the GL if you're doing it in the GL. If you're using the QuickBooks, you would want to move the money from one account to the other in QuickBooks. A good question might be, well, how in the world do I know when to transfer that money? I would do it right now, but if you have separate departments that handle that, a good report for you to use, and I'm not going to go into it, we're running out of time, would be the A170. It's one of the reports that you'll want to look into, and that will help you determine which deposit should be moved over. Just real briefly, if you were going to be moving that money in the general ledger, because you've already told PropertyBoss that's what you've done, you don't need to do it in PropertyBoss anywhere. You would go straight to the general ledger, which is almost like its own little software, or your QuickBooks, and you would want to go physically into creating one journal entry that moves money from one account into the other account. So I have both of them here, as you can see. So I would be looking to increase my checking account by however much money, I'm moving. Let's say in my example, I think it was $900. My $900, I would, if I'm trying to increase this checking account, this one would be the debit and this one would be the credit. If you find out that you get those journal entries mixed up, you can always just flip-flop them. And the bottom line is we want this number to increase and we want that number to decrease, so that when you run your security deposits held report, you can see what'll happen is that will show that that money has been removed, and it will also balance with your bank. So here's what we're seeing. We're seeing all the deposits that are being held right now, and we're able to determine how much should be sitting in that escrow account. And once we've paid that money and made that transfer and we go to reconcile, sure enough, this money should be gone. Now that's a good report for you to run and keep an eye on that month over month over month.